Administrator Vex stared at his holographic display with the kind of expression typically reserved for tax audits and root canal procedures. The numbers glowing in front of his 6 eyes were, to put it diplomatically, absolutely terrible. To put it less diplomatically, they were a complete disaster, wrapped in bureaucratic incompetence, with a side of interstellar headaches. 47 years, he muttered to himself, running one of his 4 hands through what passed for hair on his species. 47 years of void crawler infestations, and we're still stuck with a kill quota system that makes about as much sense as a chocolate teapot. The Galactic Pest Control Council had seemed like such a good idea when they'd founded it. Get all the civilized species together, establish some standardized procedures, create a nice orderly system for dealing with the galaxy's more unpleasant life forms. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. Absolutely everything. The void crawlers were the latest in a long line of cosmic inconveniences that made Vex question his career choices. Picture a spider the size of a small spacecraft, with the charming habit of eating through hull plating and the delightful tendency to reproduce faster than a rumor in a small town. They'd infested 17 star systems so far, and the standard approach was working about as well as using a water gun to stop a forest fire. The quota system was supposed to be fair and equitable. Each species got assigned a certain number of void crawlers to eliminate based on their military capabilities, technological advancement, and available resources. The Zephyrians, with their advanced plasma weapons, took about 4 years to clear their quota of 50,000. The Crystalline Collective, with their hive mind coordination, managed their assignment in 3 years. Even the notoriously lazy Blob Confederation eventually got their numbers down after 5 years of what they generously called strategic patience. But humans? Nobody really knew what to expect from humans. Vex pulled up the file on Earth's newest applicant. The species had only made contact 6 months ago, arriving in ships that looked like they'd been assembled in someone's garage by a particularly ambitious mechanic with questionable taste in aesthetics. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their diplomatic skills were, to be charitable, still developing, and their approach to problem-solving seemed to involve a disturbing amount of explosives and caffeine. "This should be interesting," Vex said, which in his experience was usually code for, "This is going to give me another stress-induced molting cycle." The intercom crackled to life. "Administrator Vex, the human representative has arrived for the pest control briefing." Vex sighed deeply, a sound that came out more like a deflating balloon than any noise a human would recognize. "Send them in. Let's get this over with." As the door slid open, Vex couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Then again, he'd had that same thought about the last 15 species, and his office wall was currently decorated with certificates of completion that might as well have been participation trophies for "tried really hard but took forever." Time would tell. It always did, usually while laughing at his expense. The human who walked through the door looked exactly like what Vex had expected, which was to say, completely unremarkable and vaguely concerning. Commander Rick Thompson stood about average height for his species, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform that had seen better decades. His hair was the color of dirt. His eyes had the slightly glazed look of someone who'd consumed too much caffeine, and he carried himself with the kind of casual confidence that usually preceded spectacular disasters. "Administrator Vex, I presume?" Rick said, extending his hand in that bizarre human greeting ritual. "Rick Thompson, Earth Defense Corps. Thanks for fitting me into your schedule." Vex stared at the outstretched appendage for a moment before remembering that humans like to grab each other's hands and shake them for reasons that defied logical explanation. He tentatively reached out with one of his 4 hands, and Rick immediately gripped it with the enthusiasm of someone operating heavy machinery. "Right then," Rick continued, settling into the chair that adjusted itself to accommodate his bipedal frame. "I understand you've got a bit of a bug problem." "A bit of a bug problem," Vex repeated slowly. "Commander Thompson, the void crawlers have devastated 17 star systems. They consume starship hulls, reproduce at an exponential rate, and have defensive capabilities that make them nearly impossible to eliminate with conventional weapons. Most species consider this assignment a test of their civilization's resolve and technological prowess." Rick nodded thoughtfully. "So they're like space termites, but bigger and more annoying." Vex felt one of his eyes twitch. "I suppose that's one way to put it." "Great. What's my quota?" Vex pulled up the holographic display, running calculations based on Earth's estimated military capacity, technological level, and population density. The numbers weren't particularly flattering. Based on our analysis of human capabilities, we're assigning you a quota of 12,000 void crawlers. 12,000? Rick raised an eyebrow. That's it? Commander Thompson, the Zephians required 4 years to eliminate 50,000 with their advanced plasma technology. The Crystalline Collective needed 3 years for 45,000 with their hive mind coordination. 12,000 is actually quite generous, considering your species' current technological limitations. Rick shrugged. Fair enough. When do I start? Vex blinked, which was quite a production when you had 6 eyes. When do you... Commander, don't you want to review the tactical reports, study their behavioral patterns, consult with your military strategists? Most species spend months just on the preliminary planning phase. Nah, I'm good. Rick waved dismissively. I skimmed the file on the way over. Big spiders, eat metal, multiply fast, don't like loud noises. Got it. You skimmed the... Commander Thompson, that file contains 47 years of accumulated research and tactical analysis. Yeah, it was pretty thorough. Bit repetitive, though. Anyway, where do I sign? Vex stared at Rick for a long moment, then slowly pushed the contract across his desk. Rick glanced at it for approximately 30 seconds, scribbled his signature at the bottom, and leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who just finished a mildly tedious chore. Excellent, Rick said, clapping his hands together. I'll knock this out over the weekend and have those numbers for you by Monday morning. Vex's jaw dropped, which was particularly dramatic, given that his species had 3 of them. Over the weekend? Commander Thompson, I think there may have been a miscommunication. The quota is 12,000 void crawlers. Most species require years to... Yeah, you mentioned that. Rick stood up and straightened his uniform. Don't worry about it, Administrator. I've got this handled. Just email me the coordinates and I'll get started Saturday morning. As Rick headed for the door, Vex called after him desperately. Commander Thompson, perhaps you'd like to observe the Tentacled Coalition's current operation. They're only 7 years into their assignment, but they've developed some innovative strategies that might... Thanks, but I'm good, Rick replied cheerfully. I've got my own methods. The door slid shut behind him, leaving Vex alone with his mounting sense of dread and the growing suspicion that he was about to witness either the most spectacular success or the most catastrophic failure in the history of galactic pest control. He was betting on the latter. By Friday afternoon, word had spread through the Galactic Pest Control Council like a particularly virulent space flu. A human was going to attempt a void crawler elimination over a weekend. The reaction was what you might generously call mixed, and what you might more accurately call barely contained panic mixed with morbid curiosity. Vex found himself on the observation deck, along with representatives from 12 different species, all of whom had gathered to witness what promised to be either a historic moment or a spectacular disaster, possibly both. This is unprecedented, chittered Ambassador Clixon of the insectoid hierarchy, wringing her 4 hands nervously. Our species required 18 months to eliminate 8,000 crawlers. The human claims he can eliminate 12,000 in 2 days? Impossible, rumbled General Stonehide of the Rock People. Our geological survey team spent 3 years just mapping the infestation sites. How can one being accomplish what takes entire civilizations years to complete? Through the observation deck's massive viewports, they could see Rick's ship docked at the loading bay. If you could call it a ship. It looked more like someone had taken a standard human transport vessel and let a particularly creative mechanic have a weekend alone with it and an unlimited supply of duct tape. What exactly is he loading onto that vessel? Asked Dr. Tentacles of the Cephalopod Consortium, her eye stalk swiveling to get a better view. Vex checked his datapad. According to the manifest, energy drinks, something called beef jerky, approximately 40 rolls of duct tape, and what appears to be modified gaming equipment. Gaming equipment? Ambassador Clixon's antennae twitched with confusion. For pest elimination? That's what it says here. Also, 17 different types of projectile weapons, something labeled the Good Playlist, and a device called a coffee maker that apparently requires its own power generator. Dr. Tentacles bobbed thoughtfully. Perhaps humans have developed some advanced simulation technology we're unaware of? A sophisticated virtual reality training system? Down in the loading bay, Rick emerged from his ship carrying what looked suspiciously like a cooler filled with ice and beverages. He waved cheerfully up at the observation deck, apparently oblivious to the dozen pairs of alien eyes watching his every move with a mixture of fascination and horror. He's treating this like a recreational activity, General Stonehide observed, his rocky features contorting into what might have been disbelief. Does he not understand the severity of the situation? Vex watched Rick disappear back into his ship, only to emerge moments later with what appeared to be a portable chair and a device with a screen. I'm beginning to suspect that humans have a fundamentally different relationship with the concept of impossible tasks. Or with the concept of common sense, muttered Ambassador Clixon. Rick's voice crackled over the comm system. Hey Vex, quick question. The infestation sites you sent me, those are accurate coordinates, right? Because I'm planning my route and I want to make sure I'm not missing any of the good spots. Vex keyed his microphone. Commander Thompson, those coordinates represent 47 years of careful survey work by our most experienced reconnaissance teams. Perfect. Oh, and one more thing. I know the files said they don't like loud noises, but what's their opinion on really, really loud music? Like structural damage to nearby buildings loud? The assembled representatives exchanged concerned glances. Dr. Tentacles leaned toward her microphone. Commander Thompson, this is Dr. Tentacles of the Cephalopod Consortium. Are you planning to use sonic weapons? So the weapons? Nah, I'm just gonna play some music while I work. Helps me focus. Don't worry about it. As Rick's ship began its pre-flight sequence, Vex found himself gripping the observation deck's railing with all four hands. The engines hummed to life with a sound that was less advanced propulsion system and more barely contained explosion. All right, folks, Rick's voice came over the comm one last time. I'm heading out, should have this wrapped up by Sunday evening. Try not to worry too much. The ship lifted off with all the grace of a particularly determined brick, disappearing into the star field with a trajectory that seemed to have been plotted by someone with only a passing familiarity with the laws of physics. In the observation deck, 12 different species stood in stunned silence, watching the human ship vanish into the void. Well, Vex said finally, this should be interesting. It was the kind of interesting that usually required extensive paperwork and explanations to superiors who were not going to be pleased with the answers. Saturday morning, 800 hours Galactic Standard Time. Vex's communicator chirped with the first status update from the humans' mission. He'd barely had time to finish his morning stimulant when Rick's cheerful voice filled the observation deck. Morning, Vex. Just wanted to let you know, I'm starting the extermination process. First site looks pretty heavily infested. Oh, and fair warning, it's going to get loud. Before Vex could respond, the communication cut to what sounded like a fusion reactor having an argument with a thunderstorm. Through the static, they could just make out Rex's voice shouting something that sounded suspiciously like, Die Hard soundtrack maximum volume. The tracking display lit up with the first confirmed kills. 10 void crawlers, then 50, then 100. That's actually quite impressive for the first hour, admitted Dr. Tentacles, her eye stalks focused intently on the readout. Most species average 12 to 15 eliminations per day in their initial operations. The numbers kept climbing. 200, 500, 800. By 1100 hours, Rick had eliminated over 1,500 void crawlers, and his status updates were becoming increasingly enthusiastic. Vex, buddy, these things are way easier to kill than your reports made them sound. I mean, sure, they're the size of shuttlecraft and they spit acid, but they've got terrible situational awareness. I've been picking them off with basic projectile weapons while they're distracted by the music. It's like fishing, but with more explosions and better sound effects. Ambassador Clixon's mandibles clicked nervously. Did he just say basic projectile weapons? The Zephyrin assault teams required plasma cannons to penetrate their exoskeletons. The comm crackled again. Oh, and Vex, your tactical reports mentioned they're vulnerable to sonic disruption. But you didn't mention they absolutely hate death metal. I've got them coming out of their nests just to see what the noise is about. It's like they can't help themselves. General Stonehide leaned forward, his granite features creased with confusion. He's using their own curiosity against them? Also, Rick continued, sounding like he was having the time of his life, whoever wrote up their behavioral analysis was spot on about the pack hunting thing, except they forgot to mention that if you eliminate the alpha crawler, the rest of them just sort of mill around looking confused for about 30 seconds. Plenty of time to take them out with basic ordnance. By 1400 hours, Rick had cleared 3 entire infestation sites. His kill count was approaching 4,000, and his status reports were getting more detailed and significantly more disturbing. Site 4 is interesting. The crawlers here seem to have developed some kind of primitive tool use. They're using chunks of hull plating as shields. Cute, but ineffective against armor-piercing rounds. Oh, and they've figured out how to coordinate attacks, but only when they can hear each other over the music. Crank the volume to 11 and they lose all tactical cohesion. Vex stared at the readout in growing amazement and horror. He's conducting real-time behavioral analysis while simultaneously eliminating them at a rate that defies all previous projections. Site 5 had some kind of queen, Rick reported around what sounded like him eating something crunchy. Bigger than the others, more aggressive, definitely smarter. Took 3 grenades and a direct hit from the main gun. Good thing, too, because she was coordinating the smaller ones into some pretty sophisticated ambush patterns. Without her, they're back to random swarming behavior. By 1800 hours, Rick had eliminated over 6,000 void crawlers. Half his quota. In one day. The observation deck had filled with more alien representatives as word spread through the galactic community. The Ethereal Council had sent observers. The Machine Collective had dispatched analysis units. Even the notoriously reclusive deep space hermits had emerged from their meditation pods to witness what was rapidly becoming the most efficient pest elimination operation in recorded history. Rick's evening report came in just as Vex was contemplating whether his species had strong enough alcohol to deal with this situation. Day 1 complete, 6,237 confirmed eliminations. Found some interesting behavioral patterns, developed some new elimination techniques, and discovered that void crawler carapaces make excellent improvised armor plating when you duct tape them to your ship's hull. Who knew? The assembled aliens exchanged glances that ranged from impressed to terrified to completely bewildered. Tomorrow, I'm planning to hit the 3 big infestation sites. Should be able to wrap up the remaining 5,000 or so before dinner. Oh, and Vex, you might want to update your tactical manuals. These things are nowhere near as dangerous as your report suggested. They're actually kind of fun to hunt once you figure out their patterns. The communication ended, leaving the observation deck in stunned silence. Dr. Tentacles spoke first, her voice filled with the kind of awe usually reserved for witnessing supernovas. He eliminated over 6,000 in a single day. Our most optimistic projections suggested 12,000 would require at least 18 months of coordinated military action. And he's treating it like a recreational activity, General Stonehide added, his voice hollow with disbelief. Vex looked at the tracking display, watching Rick's ship settling into what appeared to be a standard rest cycle at the edge of the 7th infestation site. The human was camping. In the middle of the most dangerous pest elimination operation in galactic history, he was camping, like he was on some kind of vacation. Remind me, Vex said slowly, never to ask humans what they consider a challenging assignment. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of cosmic irony that made Vex question whether the universe had a sense of humor, and if so, whether it was particularly cruel. His communicator began chirping at 6:30 hours with Rick's morning check-in. Morning, Vex. Beautiful day for pest control. Just finished my coffee, and I'm ready to wrap this up. Should have the remaining crawlers eliminated by lunch, but I might stretch it out until dinner just to enjoy the scenery. Vex rubbed his temples with 2 hands while reaching for his stimulant dispenser with the other 2. The observation deck was packed with representatives from 23 different species now, including several high-ranking military officials who had arrived overnight specifically to witness what the Galactic News Network was calling the Weekend Extermination Event. Admiral Tentacle 7 of the Cephalopod Defense Force floated near the main display, her chromatophores shifting through patterns that indicated either deep concentration or mild panic. Our military analysis teams have been reviewing the tactical data from yesterday's operation. The humans' approach to pest elimination appears to violate several established principles of warfare. How so? Asked Vex, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. He's treating each infestation site as a separate puzzle to be solved, rather than a military target to be destroyed. When he encounters new crawler behaviors, instead of adapting his strategy to counter them, he adapts his strategy to exploit them. It's unprecedented. The morning report started coming in at 900 hours sharp. Site 7 is an interesting one. Rick's voice crackled over the comm, accompanied by the now familiar soundtrack of explosions and what sounded like classical music. The crawlers here have built some kind of hive structure out of salvaged ship parts. Pretty impressive engineering, actually. Almost a shame to blow it up. Almost. By 1,000 hours, Rick had eliminated another 800 crawlers and was providing running commentary that was simultaneously educational and deeply concerning. You know what's funny about these things? They're individually pretty smart, but they have terrible group decision-making skills. I've been herding entire colonies into kill zones just by playing different types of music from opposite directions. They can't decide which sound source is more threatening, so they cluster right in the middle, where I can take them out with area effect weapons. Supreme Commander Boulder Crusher of the Rock People's Military Academy leaned forward, his crystalline eyes fixed on the tactical display. He's manipulating their behavioral patterns in real time. This level of adaptive strategy typically requires months of preparation and extensive field testing. Site 8 had some kind of crawler variant I haven't seen before, Rick reported around noon, sounding genuinely excited. Smaller than the standard ones, but faster and more aggressive. Took me about 20 minutes to figure out they're actually juvenile crawlers that haven't developed their full defensive capabilities yet. Once I adjusted my targeting parameters, they went down pretty easily. Interesting evolutionary adaptation, though. The kill count display was climbing steadily, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000. Rick was casually approaching his entire quota while providing enough tactical intelligence to rewrite the Galactic Military Academy's textbooks on pest elimination. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Many-Eyes of the Surveillance Guild, all 47 of her optical organs focused on the readout. "Our species has been studying void crawler behavior for decades. How is one human discovering more tactical applications in 2 days than our entire research division has found in 47 years? At 15:30 hours, Rick's communication tone shifted slightly, though he still sounded like someone discussing weekend gardening rather than galactic warfare. "All right, Vex, I'm down to the last few hundred. Found the main nest at Site 9, and it's a doozy. We're talking queen-sized crawler here, probably twice as big as anything in your files, with some kind of primitive command structure coordinating about 300 subordinates. This is actually going to require some proper tactics." The observation deck fell silent. After 2 days of Rick treating lethal space predators like a casual hobby, the prospect of him encountering something that required proper tactics was genuinely terrifying. 20 minutes later, Rick's voice returned, sounding slightly out of breath but thoroughly satisfied. "Well, that was fun. Turns out the Super Queen was coordinating the others through some kind of pheromone system. Disrupt the chemical communication with a few smoke grenades, and the whole command structure collapses. The big one went down after a sustained barrage from the main guns, and the rest were just cleanup work." The final numbers appeared on the display. 12,847 void crawlers eliminated. Rick hadn't just met his quota. He'd exceeded it by nearly 7%. "Mission complete," Rick announced cheerfully. "Total elapsed time, 41 hours, 37 minutes. Not bad for a weekend project. Oh, and Vex? I collected some interesting biological samples and tactical data that your research teams might find useful. I'll transmit the files when I get back to the station." In the observation deck, 23 different species stood in absolute silence, staring at numbers that shouldn't have been possible. Admiral Tentacle 7 spoke first, her voice filled with the kind of awe typically reserved for witnessing the birth of stars. 41 hours. Our most conservative estimates suggested 12,000 eliminations would require a minimum of 2 years with a full military fleet. "And he collected research data," added Dr. Many-Eyes, her optical organs dilating with what might have been respect or terror. "Tactical intelligence that our teams have been trying to gather for 5 decades. Vex slumped in his chair, all 6 of his eyes focused on the impossible numbers glowing in front of him. "I need to call my supervisor, and possibly request a transfer to a different department. Maybe something nice and quiet, like managing black hole safety protocols." Rick's ship was already appearing on the long-range sensors, heading back to the station with the casual trajectory of someone returning from a successful shopping trip. "Oh, one more thing," Rick's voice crackled over the comm. "I've got some ideas for improving your elimination protocols. Mind if I put together a presentation for the council? I think I can get your standard elimination times down from years to maybe weeks, months at the outside." The assembled representatives exchanged glances that conveyed a mix of excitement, terror, and the growing realization that the galactic balance of power had just shifted in a very significant and very human direction. Vex keyed his microphone with the resignation of someone who had just witnessed the impossible become routine. "We'll schedule you for the next council meeting, Commander Thompson. I have a feeling there are going to be quite a few questions." 3 months later, the Galactic Pest Control Council headquarters had undergone what Administrator Vex generously called organizational restructuring and what everyone else called complete existential upheaval. The main conference room, which had once hosted somber discussions about multi-year elimination campaigns, now featured a large banner reading Thompson Protocol Implementation Center and a coffee machine that required its own dedicated power grid. Vex stood before a holographic display showing the updated pest elimination statistics, and frankly, the numbers made him question whether reality had become negotiable. The average elimination time for major infestations had dropped from 3.7 years to 2.3 weeks. 12 different species had requested emergency consultations with human tactical advisors. The Crystalline Collective had actually petitioned Earth's government to borrow Rick Thompson for their annual Impossible Pest Problems Summit. The Zephyrin High Command has requested a formal review of their military doctrine, reported his assistant, a nervous, tentacled being whose name was impossible to pronounce and who had developed a stress-induced color-changing disorder since the Thompson incident. They want to incorporate human weekend project methodology into their strategic planning. Of course they do, Vex muttered, scrolling through the morning's reports. What else? The Machine Collective is offering to trade advanced propulsion technology for copies of Commander Thompson's playlist. Apparently they've determined that human music has tactical applications they hadn't previously calculated. Also, the Deep Space Hermits have emerged from their meditation pods to ask if humans have any other recreational problem-solving techniques they could observe. Vex's intercom crackled to life, and Rick's familiar voice filled the office with its characteristic blend of enthusiasm and casual competence. Hey Vex, quick update on the Andromedian spider mite situation. Knocked out their quota this morning before breakfast. Turns out they're actually pretty easy to deal with if you approach them from above while playing jazz music. Something about the syncopated rhythms disrupts their web-spinning coordination. Who knew? Anyway, I'm heading to the Outer Rim to check out that quantum wasp problem the Ethereal Council mentioned. Should have that wrapped up by Thursday. The communication ended, leaving Vex staring at his display in the kind of stunned silence that had become his default emotional state. His assistant's tentacles shifted through several colors that roughly translated to concerned bewilderment. Sir, the quantum wasp infestation has been classified as a Class 7 existential threat. The Ethereal Council's own projections suggested it would require a coordinated fleet action lasting at least 5 years. I know, Vex said wearily. I wrote the initial threat assessment myself. 15 pages of carefully documented reasons why no single individual should ever attempt to engage quantum wasps without extensive backup and preferably a small moon's worth of military support. And Commander Thompson is planning to handle them alone? Commander Thompson is planning to handle them before Thursday. There's a difference, apparently. The main conference room doors slid open, and Admiral Tentacle 7 flowed in, her chromatophores cycling through patterns that indicated either deep respect or mild trauma. Possibly both. Administrator Vex, I've just received word that the Human Defense Corps is establishing a new division called Weekend Warriors. They're recruiting volunteers for what they're calling casual problem elimination. The preliminary roster includes accountants, teachers, and someone whose primary qualification is listed as really good at video games. Vex closed his eyes, which was quite a production when you had 6 of them. Let me guess, they're planning to tackle problems that the rest of us consider civilization-threatening challenges. The recruitment advertisement specifically mentions boredom elimination through constructive pest management and turning your spare time into galactic community service. Admiral Tentacle 7's tentacles writhed in what might have been admiration or horror. They're treating existential threats to galactic civilization like volunteer work. Because for humans, apparently that's exactly what they are. Vex pulled up the latest reports from Earth's diplomatic mission. I've been reviewing their cultural files, trying to understand how an entire species can be this casually effective at solving impossible problems. Do you know what I found? I'm afraid to ask. They have a concept called weekend projects. Apparently, humans regularly use their rest periods to tackle tasks that they consider moderately challenging for recreational purposes. Building furniture, renovating living spaces, eliminating galactic pest infestations. It's all the same category of activity for them. His assistant's tentacles had shifted to a shade that roughly translated to existential crisis. Sir, if weekend projects are what humans do for mild entertainment, what do they do when they're actually trying? Before Vex could answer, his communicator chirped with an incoming message. The display showed Rick Thompson's face, grinning with the satisfaction of someone who had just completed a particularly enjoyable crossword puzzle. Hey Vex, quick update. Quantum wasp situation is resolved. Turns out they phase in and out of regular space-time, but they're still vulnerable to kinetic impact while they're transitioning between dimensional states. Hit them with enough projectiles during the phase transition, and they destabilize completely. Pretty elegant solution, actually. Anyway, I wrapped that up around noon, so I figured I'd tackle that sentient plague situation while I'm in the neighborhood. Should have that sorted by dinner. The communication ended. In the conference room, 3 different species stared at each other in the kind of silence usually reserved for witnessing natural disasters or the heat death of the universe. The sentient plague, Admiral Tentacle 7 said slowly, has been designated a galactic extinction-level threat. Our combined military forces have been developing containment strategies for 6 months. I know, Vex replied, his voice hollow with the resignation of someone who had accepted that the universe operated on principles he would never understand. I chaired the emergency committee, and he's treating it like an afternoon hobby project. Because for humans, that's exactly what it is. Vex looked out through the observation deck's massive viewport at the stars beyond, where somewhere in the void, a single human was casually solving problems that entire civilizations considered impossible. In a few hours, Rick Thompson would probably send another cheerful status update about eliminating existential threats while listening to his favorite music and wondering what to have for lunch. You know what the really terrifying part is? Vex said finally. What's that, sir? According to his file, Rick Thompson works in waste management on Earth. This isn't even his primary job. He's just doing this in his spare time because he was bored. The conference room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the coffee machine and the distant sound of Admiral Tentacle 7's stress-induced color cycling. Somewhere in the outer rim, humanity's most casual exterminator was probably humming along to his playlist while rewriting the fundamental principles of galactic threat assessment. And tomorrow he'd wake up and do it all again. Because for humans, apparently, saving the galaxy was just another way to spend the weekend. Vex reached for his communicator to start drafting his report to the High Council. He had a feeling they were going to want to discuss humanity's application for full membership in the galactic community, along with several emergency amendments to their threat classification protocols. After all, if humans could eliminate extinction-level dangers as weekend entertainment, the universe was going to need an entirely new framework for understanding what constituted an actual challenge. The scary part was, Vex was beginning to suspect that for humans they hadn't found one yet.